I don't wanna grow up, I'm a curious kid. The world has 100 questions I can play with. So I'll open my arms and eyes and wonder every day till the day I die. No one really knows why gravity exists. Naming something that...
What's at stake in this presentation is misinformation and how we respond to misinformation. So America, the world, the internet is having a problem with it these days, and it comes from headlines, it comes from even heads of states, and it actually can be embedded in the media objects themselves. And so I'm going to talk about deepfakes, deepfake detection, and then the cognitive science behind that. And what I think you guys are going to find this very fascinating, because there's a lot of hope, even though this subject often provokes a lot of worry and anxiety. So let me just give you a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to talk about. Rather than define and give you an explanation of deepfakes, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of deepfakes to give you just a sense of what these look like and how they can vary. And then I'm going to talk about a competition that recently happened where there is $1 million of prize money to essentially build the best computer vision models to detect these deepfakes. And what we're going to do there is kind of compare that to how people look at these deepfakes and believe whether these are real or not. And you can kind of see for yourself based on the videos that I'll show you, and I'll also show you how participants in experiments that we conducted have performed at discerning whether stuff's real or fake. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about something special about us and how we see the world, how we see faces specifically. And then we'll kind of think about how we feel about deepfakes and what's it look like going forward. And one thing to keep in mind is it's just generally important to slow down and ask questions when it comes to misinformation. A lot of times we can just ask a question and look for if there's any contradiction. And when those contradictions come up, we can start to say, oh, that doesn't make sense. Maybe I should give a little bit less credence to whatever this thing is that I just saw. So that's something to keep in mind. Here's the first example of a deepfake. And let me know if you can't hear the audio, Tucker, but I'll just play this now.
Imagine this for a second. One man with total control of billions of people's stolen data, all their secrets, their lives, their futures. I owe it all to Spectre. Spectre showed me that whoever controls the data controls the future.
Okay, so that's one example of a deepfake. And you might have already seen this one. This one went viral about a year ago. And obviously it's Mark Zuckerberg saying something that he never said. And that's actually what a deepfake is. It's something that allows anyone to create videos of stuff that people didn't say. So you could call it AI face swapping technology. You could call it synthetic media generation. But essentially, at the end of the day, what this is technology that allows people to produce stuff that they never said, that the person in the video has never said. And so here, something to just kind of note is that this was actually a combination of an audio thing where someone made Mark Zuckerberg's voice say what you heard, and also a lip syncing kind of technique. And so the rest is an artful way of creating a video. And so this is one of the things to keep in mind, that essentially we have machine learning models and deep learning models producing these lip syncing to fake transcripts. But then the rest of the stuff is actually just pulled from something that might have actually happened or be a green screen. And so just to give the sense of how these green screens work, right now I'm not at the Media Lab. I'm actually in my own home. And so what you see is where my office is, but obviously that's not that. I want to show you another example of what sometimes is called deep fake. And these are images of people that don't exist. So all these images at first glance look like real people. This is produced by a generative model called StyleGAN. And if you look closely, you'll notice that there actually are some things that are a little bit off. And what's off about a lot of these images is the symmetry. And so one of the telltale signs when you look at these generated faces is looking at the ears. And so one example is that kid in the middle. And the middle bottom, one ear is very, very large and one ear is much smaller. There's also a lot of other little details like weird watermarks that can come up or odd backgrounds. You notice that all the backgrounds kind of are the same thing, and it looks like there's, you know, focus in the foreground kind of thing. But you also see stuff like all the faces generally are in the same space. And so these are telltale signs that as people see these over and over again, they start to get used to how these images look, and it starts to become a little bit easier for people to detect fakes once they've seen a couple before. So these are examples from StyleGAN. And here's another example that was recently posted in the New York Times back in November. And what you can actually do is interpolate between faces. That means that you can take the generated face in the top left corner and transform it into the generated face in the top right. In the bottom right corner. And then you can find the space in between. Essentially, there's a machine learning model that's generating these images, and it has a sense of a space of faces. So like, here's the dark-haired space, or here's the glasses space, or here's the male-female space. And then you can find a trajectory between them to kind of make it look as if this person just seamlessly transforms into another thing. So just another example of what this looks like. Deepfakes don't have to be just face focused. And so I want to show another example where this is actually kind of fun. And what you see here is people dancing.
Hold on to me, close. If I tear my heart out, I still feel pain. Whatever I do, still feels the same. Act like it's nothing.
So what you have here is essentially taking a source video of a real dancer and deconstructing that into component parts. So that's what the detected pose is. And then reconstructed into with different component parts, or with a different essentially body. So you have the dancer's body deconstructed, and then you have the AI researcher's body reconstructed. And now that researcher who's never really danced in her life is dancing like a pro. And the same kind of thing happens with the face technology. So when you're seeing these face swaps, it's actually the same kind of thing where you're deconstructing a face and the different kind of points where the eyes are, the nose, the mouth, the hair, and those kind of things are, and then reconstructing it with a different face. And so just another example. And one last example before we get into this is a congressional ad that aired back in October, right before the election.
I want to start by professing my undying love for Rachel Maddow. Fox News sucks. QAnon is not real, folks. Read a book. Do you know why I hate Barack Obama? Obama is way cooler than me. He just is. As hard as I try, I can't grow a beard. I'm endorsing Joe Biden for president and Phil Ayer for
No, this is not a Russian hoax, and no, Matt Gaetz didn't finally come to his senses. What you just saw is called deepfake technology. Russia and other hostile nations are running election disinformation campaigns against the US right now to influence public opinion and wage war on the truth. If our campaign can make a video like this, imagine what Putin is doing right now.
Okay, so this is really meant to show you what's at stake, which is you can start creating fake ads that can be sent to lots of Americans and misinform people. This one is obviously letting you know about the technology, but you can imagine that without the right laws in place, that this can be really dangerous. There's also another thing going on here. If you watch the video a couple times, as I have, you'll notice that the deepfake of Matt Gaetz, the congressional representative from Florida, is actually not that great. It looks pretty obvious that it's a fake, but when it's a quick video that you only see once and it has emotional content, we often don't think about whether it's true or not. We just think about whether we agree with it or not. And so once again, the key is slowing down and asking questions, why this video might be shown, why he might be saying what he's saying. So turns out that there's a spectrum of deepfake technology, and it rhymes. Deepfakes and cheapfakes. Essentially, deepfakes are the difficult to produce videos that I was just sharing with you. And then there's things that are actually a lot easier to create. So there's mobile apps now that allow you to do this face swapping. Actually, even on Zoom, I can add a mustache or remove, well, actually you can't remove a mustache, but if you don't have one, you can add one. And you can also do lots of fun things with the snap camera. And it actually can be really fun. You can imagine in the future, you might make a new media where you can become the hero of the story and everyone who watches a movie actually sees themselves as the protagonist. So there's cool stuff that can happen, but there's also really dangerous stuff. And that kind of dangerous stuff, maybe at the extreme, would be something like showing a video of a general of, let's say, the US military burning a Quran. And if that happened, and if people in another part of the world saw that and believed that was true, you might have violence very quickly. And so these are things that we want to keep in mind. And most of it is actually quite difficult to produce, but there are some things that are easy to produce. And in fact, Photoshop's been around a long time. Artists have been making manipulated media for a long time. There's a famous image of Stalin with his water commissar, who he eventually decided he didn't want anymore. And then he decided that he wanted to erase that water commissar from history. And so he did. And there's the image of before the water commissar when he was in his good graces and after, and the guy's just erased. So this is not a new thing. It's just the way it's produced and how quick it can be produced is a new thing. And then how quick it can be produced depends on exactly what you want to do. And there's many ways. So this is this spectrum that exists. Now, if AI is getting us into this mess, maybe AI can get us out of this mess. And so it turns out that actually in the last few years, we've heard a lot of awesome things with what machine learning models can do. We've heard, a long time ago, computers can beat the best chess master. But actually in the last few years, computers can beat other experts in other games like StarCraft or the best player in Go. And Go as a game just has a larger possibility space to work through than chess. And so that's why that was a quite big breakthrough. But in the real world, there's also a lot of new developments. And so there's a cover of a Nature paper where essentially the researchers found that they can produce a skin lesion detection model on par with dermatologists. Now, it's not for all skin lesions, it's for a very specific task, but essentially they can do just as good as dermatologists. And in fact, this past year, there's really cool research coming out of Google where they were able to build a model that can decrease the false negative and false positive rate of mammogram screening using a neural network model. And so that's pretty cool. It's just better medicine just from training on lots of images and finding the patterns that exist in the data. So maybe we could do the same thing with deep fakes and just solve it with the right detection algorithms. And in fact, that's what Facebook and a couple other companies paid for over the last year to try to do. And so they hosted this thing called the Deepfake Detection Competition. There's $1 million in prize money. There are maybe 2,000 plus teams that entered. And there is, I'll show you how many images there were. Videos. There were about 100,000 videos, and you see 10 to the 8th frames. So that's what, 100 million frames. And so there's a lot of data there, and maybe, we can solve it. I'll tell you in a sec. What's really cool also about this competition, though, is not only was it incentivizing researchers to do this and then getting a lot of people, but it was also done under a lot of important ethical guidelines. And so one thing was all the data was acquired from people who accepted and signed off on being part of this data set. A lot of data sets these days, or at least in the last 15 years, have been pulled together from random images on the internet, like Flickr and other places, and those people didn't give permission beforehand. And so this is something that we're going to see happening more and more, where the data sets that we use should ask for people's permission and should have those permissions before people do research on them. The other thing that's important about this data set is it has a wide diversity of people. So there's people of different ages, people of different genders, people of different ethnicities, and that's gonna just make it a more valid data set in terms of whether this generalizes or not. Turns out that the winning computer vision model was 65% accurate in terms of detecting whether something's a deep fake or not. Okay, so 65% is on a base of 50%. If we were just random guessing, there's only two options, deep fake or authentic, and we get 50%. So it's not that much better than random. And that's maybe a little worrisome. Maybe it has to do with the kind of videos, maybe they were just really hard videos, but the best computer vision model does not do surprisingly well. So then the question is, how well would humans do? And I built a website to try to figure that out. And so what I did was create a website called detectfakes.media.mit.edu, or at least that's the URL that you can go to. It's live now if you want to check it out, or you can check it out afterwards. And basically what we do is we show you videos, and these videos all come from that deepfake detection competition. And then you play the video and you give us your guess. You say, this is just as likely a deepfake or as not, or you say, I have 90% confidence this is a deepfake, or 25% confidence that it's not that it's a deepfake. And so you can kind of slide along this line, and then we look at how well people do. So basically, we've created this website. You can come to the website and view it, and many people have. In fact, I think last time I checked, 19,000 people have come to play around with this website. And what we do is, in addition to asking that first question, we ask a second question. After you submit your first question, we say, actually, the computer vision model predicts that it has this probability that it's a deep fake. And then we give you a chance to change your answer and then go on. And so the idea there is, not only do we want to see how well people do, but we want to see how well they do with decision support. And the idea here is that we want to emulate what content moderators might be doing at a place like Facebook or Twitter or some other place, because essentially the alternative to AI models to detect fakes is hiring human beings, people, to detect fakes. And you can imagine that not only are you hiring people to do this, but you also are supporting people with the model's predictions so they can have a little bit more information and make better judgments. And so we want to see, do they make better judgments with the support? Because you can imagine that sometimes one might get lazy when they have these kind of support tools, and actually might perform worse. And there's been evidence of that in medical fields of late. And so here's how well people did on the data set. Essentially, we have people performing at 67% accuracy, which is just about the same as the computer vision model was performing on the overall data set. So not on average so much better, not really worse. On these particular videos, the computer did slightly better just because this was a sample of 50 of the 100,000 plus videos. But what's interesting here is that we're talking about ordinary people. So they've never been trained. They actually come from a website called Prolific. And basically they're paid a few dollars, essentially at like a rate of $10 an hour, but for however much time they spend. And they try to guess these things. And so actually a lot of people did much better. And that's one thing to keep in mind. And once again, they're untrained. So this is at least a start of something hopeful. But now let me show you another video. And so in this website and deepfake detection competition, there were many videos that were all 10 seconds long, and they were all inconsequential from a political perspective. They were all ordinary people having like a conversation or maybe by themselves, and it was all a perceptual task. So it's not using reasoning to think like, oh, would someone say this kind of thing? It's more using reasoning and visual perception to say like, oh, do these ears look reasonable? Should that person, like, is that extra blinking like real or not? But what I did is I also added in a few videos that were more politically charged. And so here's one of them, and I'll play it for you.
Democracy is a fragile thing. More fragile than you want to believe. If the election fails, there is no democracy. I don't have to do anything. You're doing it to yourselves. People are divided.
So that's Kim Jong-un. And I won't tell you yet whether it's
democracy.
Deep fake or not. But I'll tell you what the computer vision model said. It said that's a 1% likelihood that it's a deep fake. And the crowd consensus of participants was it's a 47% likelihood that it's a deep fake. Some people said it was very low likelihood. Some people said it was a high likelihood. In fact, 25% of people said it was above 90% likelihood that it's a deep fake. So a lot of people have a good sense that it's a deep fake. But the thing is, a lot of people don't, like, they don't really know. If you're saying 47% likelihood that it's a deep fake, it's kind of like you're 50-50, you're on the fence, I'm not sure. Whereas the 1% likelihood it's a deep fake, now the computer vision model really was confidently wrong. And that's an issue, because this is the kind of video that you would want to catch, especially because other people aren't catching it. And what's also interesting to think about here is there are a lot of things that might have given away that that was a deep fake. Maybe the biggest of them all is just an understanding of the North Korean leader and whether he would be speaking English. Now, it's likely that he does speak English. It's unlikely that he would be giving a speech in English taunting Americans, especially given that he recently met with Trump in the last couple of years. So just things to think about, the slow down and question approach. So there's actually something kind of cool going on, which is that humans and machines actually see things a little bit differently. And let me show you what I mean by that. Here's an example where you have an object, actually a couple objects, we'll look at the upper left corner. There's a red object and blue objects, and they have shadows. And then in the upper right corner, those same two objects exist, but they're different shadows, okay? Now, in the bottom left corner, there are the same two objects, and we have a composition of shadows. So we have the shadows for the blue things from A, and we have the shadows in the red thing from B. And basically, it's a situation that is not physically possible, assuming you have like one sun. Maybe it's possible in indoor space, but assuming there's one sun and we're outdoors, it wouldn't be possible on Earth. And so there's something funky going on. It turns out that there's actually a really clean way to analyze this and solve it, which is to look at the shadow trajectories and just make sure that they all ultimately come from the same point. And so you can essentially take a ruler and just do this yourself. But people are generally not so good at doing this without taking that ruler out, with doing this just on the fly, having never seen this before. C looks just as reasonable to me as A and B. Until thinking about this and doing that. So humans are not always so good at these kind of tricks, and computers can do these kind of tricks quite well. Here's something kind of interesting. This is called the Thatcher Illusion. That's a picture of Margaret Thatcher. It's upside down, of course. And the reason it's upside down is because upside down images actually mess with your visual processing of the face. So it turns out that there's something kind of funny about the image. And if you've seen this before, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't seen this, you're in for a surprise. And it's a trigger warning, because if you look at her face in the bottom, this is just, I just flipped it right side up for you to check it out. It's kind of creepy to see that face on the bottom right. And what that face is it's Margaret Thatcher, but what's happened is her eyeballs have been flipped upside down and her mouth has been flipped upside down. Well, it turns out that in the top image, it kind of looks normal to us because we're used to seeing lips right side up and eyes right side up. And so despite the face being upside down, it doesn't look so weird when the component parts are right side up. But when everything's right side up, then our kind of understanding of visual relationships gets a little weirded out by the fact that things are flipped upside down and she looks a little bit odd. So just something to show that we do have kind of interesting specialized processing of faces. And this has been something that cognitive scientists and people in visual perception have researched for a long time. This was kind of big research in the 80s, and it's kind of it's no longer kind of the forefront of research, but it's just an interesting thing because actually this might give us hope. If we're good at dealing with faces, maybe we have something special. So when we're just thinking about perception and not the reasoning cues, we actually might have something that can help us to be kind of intuitive about these deepfakes. Here's another image that kind of shows you another aspect of how face processing is special. So this is a composite of two people, and you know, I want you to think about who these two people are, and they're a bit more famous, let's say 20 years ago than they are today, but they're still famous household names. I've split them apart so you can see them a little bit better. And what the research shows is that when you show people this image split apart, it's much easier to identify Woody Allen in the top left and Oprah Winfrey in the bottom right. But when they're together like this, now that I've said it, it makes a little bit more sense. When they're together like this, it's actually a lot trickier. And that's because we look at the face holistically rather than just the component parts. And so essentially the holistic aspect of the face has been destroyed when we make them composites, whereas we can kind of see what it might look like when they're split apart like this. So just another example to kind of demonstrate this point that we process faces holistically. So what I wanted to do was create this experiment where we actually destroy our holistic face processing abilities and see if that affects our ability to detect fakes. And so basically the idea there is that if specialized processing does indeed help us detect fakes, then we should be worse at detecting fakes when we destroy that specialized processing. And so what I did was create an experiment where you have a control group, which is just normal videos. You have 3 treatment groups, which are inverted videos, kind of like the Thatcher illusion, misalignment videos, basically where you split the head part way, and then occlusion videos where you're blocking out the eyes. And then the question is, are people better or worse, or most likely, are they worse when you have these treatments? And so here's just a sense of what that design looks like, because it's kind of fun to see how experimental designs work. And so basically, someone comes to the website, and first they're assigned to a treatment group of control or anger elicitation. This treatment is an interesting one to add in just because we know that when people are on social media, often emotions are involved. And so we wanted to see if emotions change our ability to make good judgments about whether stuff's real or fake. So that was one thing that we also want to look at. But after we do this emotion elicitation exercise, and that exercise is basically asking people to think about a time when they were really, really angry, and then convince us in writing why that was the case. Turns out that this is a tried and true method of getting someone angry. It's incidental anger. It's like not related to the task, and it's also not that dangerous just because it's someone reflecting on a past time. But it is something to consider. This is making people reflect on stuff that's not always comfortable. So after this emotional elicitation exercise, we show 5 example videos so people just get a sense of what deepfakes look like and what authentic videos look like, at least from the perspective of our sample. We give an attention check video to make sure that people are not just like clicking through and being silly. And it's a really easy video where the person literally says at the end that it's a deepfake, but we just, we show that, so then we basically weed out all people who are unable to guess that correctly. And then we show 20 videos, and we randomly assign these videos from our sample of 54 videos. And we also randomly assign each video to be, just a regular video, or be flipped upside down, or have that cut off halfway on the face, or have the eyes blocked out. And what we see is, in fact, yeah, people are worse. So there are these drops, and these drops only occur for the computer vision model in the inversion treatment. For misalignment and occlusion, it doesn't affect the computer vision model at all. And the reason the computer vision model actually probably does worse on the inversion is because the model didn't train on inverted images, which makes sense. It shouldn't, but what's interesting about these results is it hints at this idea that specialized processing is at play, just because we're actually getting worse when we're messing up the specialized processing. We also, and I should also mention, all those things are statistically significant at the 1% level. And so what we did is we had a large sample of people. We actually had 300 people that we paid from this platform where you get research participants. We also had about 18,000 people who just came from the internet on their own volition, just because they're interested to participate. We also see that anger does reduce people's ability to detect fakes. And what was quite interesting was if we just focus on the deepfake data, deepfake videos, people are actually no worse. It's on the real videos. People are worse at knowing it's a real video when they're angry. And it seems like they're just shifting their judgments to think more things are deep fakes when they're angry than when they're in a control condition. So the takeaways here are that ordinary humans people who haven't been trained at all on these deepfakes, or you saw there's 5 training videos, but that was mostly so they could know how to perform the task. They can actually outperform the best machines. And so imagine if you actually train people to be content moderators and give them a good job at one of these social media companies, then that actually might be a really good solution to flagging fake content. A second thing is that human performance drops when holistic processing is tampered with. So there might be something that we're actually quite good at. I mean, we see faces all the time. We've actually evolved to be able to recognize faces. That's been a very useful thing for us. And so turns out that that useful thing might be really useful when it comes to deepfake technology and detecting it. And then the last thing is that what's going on a platform in the experience at hand really matters. And so, this is just an experiment where it's supposed to generally be fun, but we did, for the people we paid, do this emotional elicitation exercise, and it decreased how well people did. And so this, is kind of good evidence that your emotions are going to affect your performance. And so you want to think about that when leading a team, or when if you can catch yourself in those moments of anger, you might want to think about waiting to make decisions. So I'll just harp on this thing one more time. I think one of the good solutions and takeaways is to slow down generally and ask questions and just be curious and let that curiosity take you to asking whether something's real and asking how you know it's real. And I'll share a quote that a teacher once shared with me. I actually took 2 years of physics with Tucker, and I think this was almost on let's say a weekly basis. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, from the famed Carl Sagan, but I actually thought it was just a Tucker original quote until I found out. But this is another way to think about what is a heuristic to think about whether something's real or not. Think about this quote: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So I want to say thank you for coming and open this up to questions, because I think that's actually the most fun when we have a conversation about this.
Wow, thank you, Matt. Maybe you'll allow me, folks, to ask the first question. I'd like to know, Matt, if any real deepfake has done real harm. I guess any deepfake done real harm in the eyes of the victim. Say in the case of Zuckerberg, I don't remember exactly what he was saying in that deepfake or what product he was pushing. But let's say in Zuckerberg's eyes or in any deepfake victim's eyes, has a deepfake done harm?
Yeah, unfortunately it has. And so the ones that have done the most harm do personal harm. And so one of the uses of deepfake technology has been to create pornography. And so essentially, people against their will, without their permission, have videos where they look like they're engaged in pornography when it's not actually the real person, but then it looks bad for family, friends, and this happens to sometimes politicians or more publicly oriented individuals. So yes, really negative things have happened on a personal individual level. We have not seen this lead to like political unrest, so to speak. It hasn't started a revolution, but the wrong thing at the wrong time, I think, could be very dangerous.
Thanks, Matt. Let's see, I'm checking the chat for questions here. Lena asks, won't technology eventually advance to the point where we won't be able to discern fake from real, I take it, at all?
That's a great question. Yeah, so right now it's this research, and what I was talking about is what exists today. And turns out that we can identify a lot of these things. In the future, Yeah, we can imagine that a video is just as good. You can make someone say anything, move their hands and arms and put whatever background. I could definitely imagine that. And definitely when I watch Star Wars, it looks so real to me. And I think that's so cool. So how do you know fake from real? Well, you're gonna have to use more than just perceptual cues. You're gonna have to use reasoning. You're gonna have to ask, that question that Carl Sagan asked you to ask, which is, or you're gonna make that statement, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and ask yourself, is this claim supported by any evidence? What do I know that would lead me to for this to be true? And so basically what's gonna happen is that you're gonna stop just believing an image because you see it, or just believing a video because you see it, and you're going to ask more, how did this come to be? Who produced it? Why did they produce it? And by asking those questions, you are going to be able to identify reality. But it does require us to live in the world and kind of get out of Plato's cave. And that means meet people across the spectrum, get out in front of the computer and get out and just be in the world and just confirm for yourself. So I think those things are really important.
Matt Kelly Graham asks, have you heard of the deep fake of Nixon? I take it President Nixon saying a space flight to the moon crashed.
Yes. So in fact, Nixon had prepared a speech in case the mission to the moon failed. And that speech he never had to give, luckily. And what a couple of researchers, actually colleagues at MIT, did is they reimagined history and said, well, what would happen if that actually did happen? Let's showcase deepfake technology and remind ourselves a little bit about history. And I believe it was also on an anniversary date, like maybe the 50th anniversary or something like that. A pretty cool video. I highly suggest checking it out.
Wonderfest hero Eric Yao asks, does cognitive dissonance play to the detriment of the ability to identify deepfakes, for example, with political or religious videos?
Now that's a really, really good question. And I actually don't yet have an answer. I have hypotheses, and I am running an experiment probably in 2 weeks to answer exactly that. And so basically what I've done is, with a collaborator, we've created a bunch of political videos of Biden and Trump saying different things. And some of them are kind of Trump like conservative things, and some of them are liberal things, and we have both of them saying both sides of the aisle. And what we want to see is how different people from different backgrounds believe different things. And so we'll have an answer to that soon. My thinking is probably yes, but I don't have empirical evidence for it in the deepfake domain. You do see it in just like general media though, and headlines and what we share. That definitely is the case.
All right, a mystery person here asks a question that is quite psychologically profound here. How do you recommend we reach a state of mind where we can most effectively discern deepfakes and other forgeries without becoming stubborn or cynical?
That's a great point, because this really makes us feel like, oh, this is really going like bad, like where's the world going? Let me mention that the whole Earth catalog, which used to, be distributed back in the 1980s, actually, I think out of Sausalito, that was really cool. One journal had this, I think it was 1986. And I know this because of the esoterica that you kind of pursue in PhD research and try to like tie every kind of loose end together. Basically, there is a cover piece of aliens coming into San Francisco. And at the very start, it basically said that you can no longer use photography as evidence in court. And basically it said that there's this evidence of this guy's client sleeping with someone who's not his wife, and therefore he needs to, something has to happen to him. But the lawyer says, well, I could doctor any image to have my client sleep with anyone because, you know, we have enough, like assuming that my client's so powerful that, you know, there's enough means somewhere else to make this happen. It could even be my client sleeping with your honor. And I always found that kind of funny that the lawyer might joke like that. But the idea here is that this kind of thinking has been around for a long time. And we've been seeing Photoshop happen a lot in magazine covers. And a lot of times people don't realize that the body images that are being shown are actually non-realistic body images. And they're not only non-realistic, they're actually faked body images. So it is dangerous, but the more we know about this kind of stuff, the more we can say, I only give this a grain of salt of credibility. And so when I see an image on a magazine cover, I'm like, I don't think that's actually what the person really looks like. And likewise, when you see a video on the internet that has been sourced by some random person that has that you've never heard of before, you might ask yourself, well, this is a video that looks real, but I don't know the source, so I'm going to hold back on making a judgment. And the cool thing there is it doesn't mean you can't make judgments. It's just you got to slow down. And I think that's the state of mind that can actually help you get through this. It's that like when we slow down, we can actually stress less because we'll take time as we make decisions.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. Jim Stauffer asks, can deepfakes be detected by examining anomalies in the raw data? For example, unnaturally abrupt changes in information density or inconsistent hues of shadows?
Jim, that's a really, really good question. And the answer is yes, absolutely, but not necessarily consistently every single time, because there's so many different varieties of the kind of fake content that people can produce. And so not only can you do that, you can do stuff like looking at the emotional congruence between what someone's saying and like the content and this basically the what's it called, paralinguistic content. And so that means like the tone and the speed and like the tempo of what someone's saying. So there's like approaches like that. There's approaches that actually turns out that you can get people's heart rate and breathing rate just from a Zoom call. Essentially, as we pump blood through our system, I have a little bit more blood each time my heart beats, and so my cheeks get a little bit more red. This is generally imperceptible to the human eye, but computer vision models can do it under the right conditions. The right conditions are generally that the person isn't moving around a lot. Zoom calls are good for that. Walking is not good for that. So there are lots of ways that you can do this kind of stuff, and those features can be telltale signs. But it won't necessarily work every time. And the people building these fakes also look at all the ways that people try to detect these and then try to get around those before they release their video. The good thing is when you have this cat and mouse game, that means it requires more effort on the people producing fakes to produce good fakes. And so with high effort, they often just avoid doing it because it's too costly to them.
Matt, in the $1 million deepfake video, deepfake contest you told us about early in your presentation, there were how many contestants?
Yeah, there were like 2,200 contestants.
Who offered programs for detecting deepfakes?
Yes.
And these are largely presented by companies?
So the companies hosted the competition. So it was Facebook, Microsoft, it was something called like a partnership in AI. And then it was hosted on a website called Kaggle, and Kaggle does data science competitions. I think they actually did the Netflix competition way back when. Maybe they didn't host that, but it's in the same vein of the Netflix competition, which was how do we build the best recommendation system possible? Why don't we crowdsource all the people in the entire world, incentivize them with money, and then whoever actually produces the best stuff just gets the money. And so here you had basically all these people competing. They might have been data scientists or machine learning engineers or students, or whatever kind of things. It was like usually people don't do this full time. It's usually in their side gig and what they do for fun.
But the contest creators definitely knew when the competitor was a machine, AI, versus a human being? They had to distinguish those two fields of competition.
So this is a really important question. So the competition rules did not allow for people to engage in the competition. So basically you had to create an automated algorithm that had no access to the internet. So basically no workarounds to get human in the loop input. And the reason for it is they want an automated solution. And so I didn't engage in the competition, or I engaged in the competition only to take the data and create a website to ask a human-oriented question. But what I've done, even though it's produces a better solution, would have broken the rules and would have disqualified me from winning the money.
Wow. But is it fair to say that as deepfakes get better, it's reasonable to assume that deepfake detection technology will at best get better in parallel, so that we'll always have something like 65% accuracy in detecting deepfakes?
That's likely, yeah.
Oh man, that is bad news. So we better be heeding the Sagan advice. And I'm sorry I ever misled you to believe that that was my quotation. I didn't do that intentionally. Here's a statement or a question perhaps from Adam Borgeson. Some of the deepfakes you showed were rather low resolution. That seemed like an easier way to catch people not paying attention. Higher resolution seems to be harder because of the more precise details required. Do my thoughts here reflect what your studies have found regarding high-res versus low-res deepfakes? Is there any other data regarding high-res versus low-res?
Yeah, this is a really important question. When it's low res, it is harder for us. It doesn't mean it's not possible, but yeah, I am seeing in general, it's hard to like define a real split between high res and low res, but just from kind of more eyeballing, you can, I mean, there are specific ways, but you have to choose a threshold. The answer is, yeah, people are much better at the high res stuff. And the reason people are better at the high res stuff is because the algorithms are worse at generating high res believable content. Whereas the algorithms are quite good at low res stuff.
Got it.